Hey y'all, happy Saturday. It is June 24th and today marks our 10th consecutive day with some form of a heat alert in southeast Texas. So I guess the H in Houston stands for hot, and there's no H in Texas, but I guess we'll say that the T stands for toasty, and it is going to feel toasty across the Lone Star State today. Notice in our viewing area, which is southeast Texas, closer to Houston, feels like values in excess of 108 degrees, and that's what triggers those heat advisories. That's what we have right now locally. Across the state, though, elsewhere, those feels like values creeping up closer to 112 or 113. And as we turn the page to tomorrow, notice the ante gets upped. We get closer to 113, which is that threshold for an excessive heat watch or warning. Other parts of the state soaring closer to about 117. So we are entering into another phase or stretch of intense heat, and it does look to be long-lived. You know, Mother Nature took her foot off the gas ever so slightly, allowing for a brief intermission between rounds 1 and 2, and that left us locally with a couple days worth of heat advisories after 6 in a row of excessive heat warnings. And that is the first time since they started keeping track of these back in 2005 since that's happened over the last 18 years. We're likely going to do that again as we round out the month of June and head into the month of July, because remember that threshold I just mentioned, 113, well, that puts us certainly within range to start to see these flip from heat advisory to excessive heat watch or warning. Either way, heat alerts are a slam dunk for the next 7+ days, and we can see that that's already starting to shift and change as we take a look at what we have out there for alerts right now. I know this looks a little confusing because there's two colors, but basically the orange color is underlaid and it's area wide through noon tomorrow. From that point forward, it's going to stay in effect along the coastline through Sunday evening. However, inland locations are going to get replaced with an excessive heat watch through Sunday evening. So we're watching for the potential for those thresholds to start to climb above that 113 mark. I do think much of next week, honestly, is going to be spent in the excessive heat range, whether it's a watch or a warning, and it's going to be a while we brace ourselves and wait for this heat to break. Widening out that view once again and taking a look at the state of Texas, you can see that we are watching for that, but this extends thousands of miles. If I step out of the view, I put the ruler on there and you can see this stretches across several states. So we're talking about Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, Missouri, and even portions of Mississippi that have some form of a heat alert already in place. Now, most of that is a heat advisory, the orange shading that you see, and thresholds do differ by location, as do expiration times. West Texas, though, Southwest Texas, already bracing for that excessive heat, and we're certainly watching for the return of that locally as well. Here's where our actual temperatures look to hover over the course of the next 7 days. Most of our inland locations, again, these are Houston area highs, are going to hover between 100 and 102 degrees consistently. We're going to basically flatline there because the positioning of this heat dome is a little bit different this time around. Now, closer to the coastline, temperatures more so probably mid to upper 90s, a little bit lower. And as we take a look at our count for 100-degree days so far this year, which have all happened in the month of June, Bush Intercontinental, College Station, both racking up 3, Hobby hitting that mark once along the coastline. Again, those temperatures are a little bit lower, so haven't hit the triple-digit heat there yet. Either way, substantially above where we should be. Our average high now 93. We're talking about 8 to 10 degrees above our average, and certainly much earlier in the season than we would expect to even see our first day. Okay, so our average first triple-digit day for the area is July 19th. The record first was June 2nd, and that was back in 2011, which was a very hot and a very dry year. We didn't hit that number, but again, we've hit 3 at least at Bush Intercontinental, and comparing that to the top 5 years for count of 100-degree days, if we tack on 6 more, because the last 6 days in June look to hit 100 plus, again, that's if it verifies, we would climb our way to the number 2 spot, knocking all of these down 1 notch. Obviously, we can't take the number 1 spot because we don't have enough days left in the month to do that. But I think we very likely end up, if not in the top 5, certainly within the top 3. So that gives you an idea of how unusual this is this early in the season. July, August, absolutely not out of the realm of normalcy that we see triple-digit days. The other side of the coin, the other problem, is that we're not really cooling at night. We're going to see the return of lows that are not even low, right? They're 80 plus for most of us, and for some, What we saw with this first round of heat, they were more so in the mid 80s, 84, 85. Palacios and cool behind a couple of days. Lucky locations will maybe go down to about 79 or 78. That's about it. So a few degrees above average. This is particularly problematic for folks without adequate air conditioning, which we've got about 17,000 people still without power from those nasty storms that rolled through. Thankfully, rain chances are going to basically squash to zero from here on out, so we don't have to worry about any more of those coming through. But also low-income communities that don't maybe have adequate source to air conditioning, and also the unhoused. This doesn't give our bodies a chance to break at night. It doesn't give us a chance to give our air conditioners a break. It puts stress on infrastructure, the grid, and of course we'll be also watching the grid and ERCOT power supply and demand very closely as we make our way through the next week. All right, we talked about the fact that placement of this heat dome matters, right? First time around, it was more so often kind of in, northern Mexico, and then it meandered, it pushed a little bit farther west. That opened the door for some of these storms to swing around on the upside of this area of high pressure, but it's kind of basically set up shop smack dab in the middle of Texas. This is going to be a different heat because we also talked about the fact that wind direction plays a role in the type of heat that we experience. So I'll get to more of that in just a second, but first, take a look at rain chances over the next 5 days. I mean, heat domes, especially when they set up shop right over you, very dry, very stable air, doesn't allow for any rain to happen. So anything that does happen over the next 5 days is going to be reduced to basically a rainfall lottery. You'd be lucky to see a shower or storm. And as we break down the next 5 days locally, you can see highly unlikely, just lots of hot and dry days on the way. Couple of things to watch where that could turn into an issue. The drought, for starters, because we have made huge improvements. I mean, strides from this perspective. You look at this and this, most of east and southern Texas has exited the drought altogether, and statewide stats have about 42%. I did round these numbers. 42% drought free. 35% of what you see shaded is just abnormally dry. That's this yellow color. That's not technically a drought, but basically that's moving in the wrong direction. And you can see part of our area is starting to creep back into that zone. So drought is moderate through exceptional. These are categories D1 through D4. And we've got about 35% in that yellow category, kind of starting to inch your way back towards a drought. 23% in drought altogether. Most of that is moderate or severe. Less than 2% of the state, thankfully, is in the worst of the worst categories, but we'll have to watch and see how that changes, again, with really no rain in sight. All right, back to the wind direction thing that we talked about. Most of our winds with this first round of intense heat were southerly. So what that did was certainly bring in the humidity. That drove up those feels-like temperatures, and yeah, it was warm, but most days the actual temperature didn't actually surpass that 100-degree mark. Now with this setting up shop right in the middle of Texas, we're going to get more of a southwest wind. Winds are actually also going to be lighter as well because the area of high pressure will be right on top of us. So that's a little bit concerning from a wind generation perspective. I think we're going to have to watch that side of the energy component a little bit closer this time around. And the actual temperatures will get driven up a little bit higher. We won't see as big of a spread or separation between actual temperatures and those feels like values because it will be a little bit drier. Not by much. We're still going to be muggy. We're still going to be humid, but notice we go from this very humid to borderline tropical humidity to more so kind of the muggy to humid range of things. So it's an improvement. We got to take what we can get. I mean, we've had a little bit of practice of experiencing this at least, so our bodies are getting a little bit more used to dealing with it. The other thing to watch is how many of these all-time state records that just got broken last week are going to fall once again, right? The hottest temperature ever recorded in the state of Texas, 120 degrees, happened twice, once in Monahans back in 1994 and then in Seymour in 1936. Rio Grande Village got within 2 degrees shy of hitting that number on Tuesday. 7 locations tied or broke their all-time record, and then imagine doing that just to the following day, do it again, right? San Angelo hit 114 2 days in a row. Del Rio hit 113, and then on Wednesday hit a scorching 115 degrees. A lot of these locations are West Texas, so again, drier heat doesn't feel substantially hotter than the actual temperature. Either way, it's plenty hot enough, and as we take a look at how this shifts over time, barely, okay? The heat dome starts to move its way closer to our area and extending into Louisiana by July 4th. So very likely continuing with these above average temperatures for quite some time now. Remember to practice all those heat safety tips. Don't forget, we've got tons of resources up on our website, fox26houston.com. It's like an encyclopedia of how you can, avoid heat stress and illness, where those cooling centers are. Don't forget, check on, sensitive populations, young children, the elderly, folks who are still without power. Imagine in this heat, that's got to be brutal. And if you are spending time outside, especially during the peak heating of the day, try and limit that if you can. If not, take breaks often in the shade or AC. Stay hydrated with electrolytes too. That's important. And just listen to your body. Everybody's different. And some folks I've heard from on social media are able to handle this heat just fine. Outdoor events is when you want to watch it. And we are transitioning today. And thankfully, the Pride Parade tonight taking place in the evening hours as temperatures start to cool. So I think that's the good news there. But again, just take precautions across the board. Stay cool, stay safe as we make our way into another stretch of sizzling hot days.